Hello, everyone, and welcome into another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Monday, October 28th around here, and we have a great show for you today. We're going to start talking about that game that happened in College Station. A&M makes a big-time statement against LSU and really sets themselves up incredibly well for a CFP run. Then we'll get into a couple of big-time statement wins in Notre Dame and Bama. Notre Dame absolutely dominates Navy pretty much from start to finish. Bama, the exact same with Missouri, and a huge win for Bama just to get that confidence up as you head into a bye before a huge trip to Baton Rouge. Then we'll get to a couple of upset alerts, a ton of close calls all around the country. We'll talk about Ohio State, Texas, Kansas State, and SMU. All of them escaped, especially SMU. Somehow they were able to win that game against Duke. Then we'll get into all the other ranked teams, tell you about how they fared. Oregon really setting the pace at number one, really proving that they're the best team in the country, at least this week. Obviously, everything's changing week to week. Then we'll finish it off with just all the games we didn't have a chance to get to in the first part of the show. We'll finish it off with that, including a ton of updates from that really interesting game that happened up there in Blacksburg, Virginia. A huge win for Virginia Tech that keeps them ever so slightly in the ACC hunt. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your question on the screen, we can have fun back and forth here, is to use that super chat feature. At the bottom of the chat on the Sports Network page, you can use that little $sign, add any question, comment you'd like, and that'll pop up on the screen, and we can have a fun back and forth here. Definitely want this to be as interactive as possible. Getting into the home stretch of the season, any questions that y'all have, would love to answer. But let's go ahead and jump in here, and let's talk about that A&M win over LSU, because this was kind of a tale of two halves, wasn't it? It was a little bit all over the place in the first half for A&M, and then something very, very specific happened in the second half, and it was that quarterback change. It was a total game changer for this entire game. It was a game changer really for the entire year for A&M. At least that's what it seems right about now. But you make that change for very, very good reason. I mean, Connor Wegman was 6 for 18 in the first half, and early in the second half, they had really no identity on offense. And then they decided, we're going to run the ball. That's what we're going to do the rest of the game, and we're going to figure out if we can win that way. And man, can they. They outscored LSU 31-6 the rest of the way, really cemented themselves at the top of the SEC, and Marcel Reed became one of the most popular guys, probably the most popular guy on campus over there at College Station overnight. So, remarkable performance from him, obviously coming into a game where there's a whole lot of pressure on you, and you're coming in after halftime, you're not necessarily fully warm, scores on his very first play and doesn't really look back. Was playing really, really good football from start to finish in the second half, and I think the biggest thing you take away from this for the A&M and the LSU side, for a number of different reasons, is the adjustments that they made are such a testament to what this coaching staff is going forward. And it's such a testament to the buy-in that you've gotten even in year one from a lot of these guys around this locker room, because it would be very easy for this game to have gotten away from them. You know, LSU missed a couple opportunities in the first half to possibly push that thing to 16. If you push it to 16, maybe you keep Connor Wegman in the game because they know they have to pass the ball a little bit more consistently. So it's a little bit of a confusing kind of dance that LSU was on, but they missed a golden opportunity. There's no two ways about that. They were very much in this game, and the game just kind of got away from Garrett Nussmeier in the second half. Now, the big time thing that everyone is kind of taking away now, there are quite a few people that are kind of burying Garrett Nussmeier for whatever reason, but when you get 1 yard per carry, you're not going to be very successful. There's going to be some forcing that happens. He threw 50 passes in this game, so that was bound to happen at some point. There was not going to be a really good way for him to be successful if they weren't going to be able to run the ball, and that's something that is going to follow them for the rest of the year. So they got to find it against Bama. They got to find it against the teams that they're going to play coming up, because if they don't, we've seen what this offense is, and it's very stagnant and a lot of mistakes happening. So they got a lot to figure out over there at LSU. For A&M, Reed is your guy. I think you know that going forward. Him and Colin Klein's system just makes much more sense. Colin Klein looks a lot more comfortable calling plays for a guy that has that athletic ability, has that running ability, kind of like Avery Johnson at Kansas State last year. A huge reason that they moved to him as the starter was because he fit in Colin Klein's system and he did things very, very efficiently because of his athletic ability. Marcel Reed's kind of a cut from the same cloth, and he did make 2 throws in the second half. He completed 2 passes, but at the end of the day, when you can run the ball that efficiently and you have so many guys to go to, like Le'Veon Moss, like Amari Daniels, and then obviously Marcel Reed, you're going to have a lot of success. And then on the other side, I think you talk about the LSU defense just briefly here. not knowing or not planning for this guy to play in the game is just outright ridiculous. It's one of those things that just cannot happen going forward, and it's one of those things that shouldn't have happened going into this game. Obviously, Connor Wegman was the starter. I don't think there was much question about that going into this one. You also knew that Marcel Reed played really good football for them. He went 2-0. It was 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, was very, very efficient during his time. The leash was not going to be very long. So not planning on, not thinking about the backup getting into this game is a huge indictment on a lot of that defensive coaching staff, and something that I can't imagine is ever going to happen again for them, because this was very, very glaring that they didn't have a plan, and it was obvious from the get-go. And then in the second half, the defense went to work as well. And a lot of that we talked about, being able to stop the run plays a huge portion in that. Being able to slow down the run and force Garrett Nussmeier to make a couple of the passes that are very, very tough and kind of get in the way of a lot of teams' success are absolutely something that are going to give you more opportunities to get picks. And Garrett Nussmeier made some bad decisions, but at the end of the day, when you're forced into those situations, bad decisions are going to come, especially for a young quarterback. We saw it even with Connor Wegman in the first half. He was a little all over the place because the game got a little bit fast, the emotions got to him just a little bit, and it became a little bit too much. And that's happened to pretty much every single quarterback in the entire country. And I think for LSU, it's much less about what Garrett Nussmeier can or can't do going forward. It's more about what you can do on the offensive side of the ball, running the ball. You badly have to be able to run the ball. You badly have to be able to push the ball downfield, and can't do that if you can't get the run game going. So Caden Durham's got to play a lot better. This offensive line that is incredibly good at pass blocking, although A&M was able to get home a couple of times, they're very, very good at pass blocking. They got to get better at run blocking. They just have to. If they're not going to be able to run the ball, then it's going to be a nightmare. And then on the other side, A&M said, we're going to run the ball and dare you to stop us, and LSU just couldn't. So a huge moment for A&M. You plant your flag at the top of the SEC. You really have a very clear path to Atlanta. You win out, you're very much on your way there. Now you do have that game at the end of the year against Texas, which the script writers get one step closer to that game being 10-1 against 10-1 for a spot in the SEC title. But at the end of the day, it's an absolutely huge game for A&M. It's one of those games that really shows you the difference that a coach could make at A&M. It was one of those programs that was sitting right under the surface for quite some time. They just needed the guy to come through the doors, and exactly what happened. It was actually incredible what Mike Elko has been able to do there, and definitely sets them up for remarkable amounts of success going forward, not just this season, but beyond, because this team is going to be talented, they're going to be well coached, and they're going to be in a position in the SEC to make a lot of noise. So really remarkable performance, obviously one that they very badly needed, plants their flag at the top of the SEC, and they can continue moving forward. They got to feel really confident about where they're at. Obviously, a huge one against South Carolina in a second, but at the end of the day, doing what they need to do and taking care of business on the biggest stages. So definitely a huge win for them, and how they were able to get it. The halftime changes can't be overstated. It's not an easy decision to go away from the quarterback that had played really good football for you, had put you in this position, got the huge win over Missouri at home, had done incredible things. It's not easy to pull the trigger and go the other direction, but they badly needed to. Before Marcel Reed entered, 7 points, 3.5 yards per carry, 3.5 yards per play. After Marcel Reed entered, 31 points, 8.6 yards per play. So they were very obviously just saying, we're going to run the ball, we're going to find our rhythm in our identity, and they were able to. They were able to get the run game going, adding that one extra player for the LSU team to think about in the run game made all the difference, and the LSU defense was not remotely ready for that. And then on the other side, defense forced 4 turnovers and gets a turnover on downs in the second half. So essentially, in my book at least, forced 5 turnovers. Absolutely dominance from the A&M defense in the second half, and they were all over Garrett Nussmeier in a world where he has not been very, very often in this in college football, because the offensive line in front of him has been one of the best units over the 2 years that he's played, even a little bit. It's been one of the best units in the country. He got sacked 3 times after not getting sacked at all this season, so a remarkable performance from that D-line, and that was part of it. A&M's D-line did not give them any running room, also didn't give them much passing room for Garrett Nussmeier to work with, but LSU, 24 yards on 23 carries, that can't be the way you go about business. If you're going to throw the ball 50 times a game, Garrett Nussmeier is going to make mistakes. That is part of who he is. That's part of every young quarterback. If you're going to make him throw the ball 50 times against a defense with that many athletes on the back end, he's going to make mistakes. He's going to throw a picks, and you're going to put yourself in a bad spot. you have to be able to run the ball. Plain, simple, period. If LSU cannot run the ball, they are not getting to the CFP. If they can run the ball against Alabama, then they're putting themselves in a really good spot going forward. But they definitely couldn't on Saturday, and it really came back to bite them. And then finally, A&M just played to their strength. They said, we do not need to pass the ball downfield. We don't need the pop plays. We don't need to attack this back end that probably could be attacked. But at the end of the day, they weren't doing it very effectively. They said, we're going to complete 8 passes in the game, 3 total in the second half, 2 after the quarterback change happens, and we're still going to win. We're going to run all over you, and we're going to get 24 points off turnovers, and this thing is going to change in a hurry, and that's exactly what happened. So huge amount of respect to Mike Elko for not forcing things, because going into halftime, if they were down 16, if LSU made those 2 field goals, I think it totally changes the approach for A&M going into that second half. They're probably thinking, we got to throw the ball a little bit more often. Maybe you get a couple of mistakes from Marcel Reed, or they keep Connor Wegman in there and he continues to not necessarily play the best football. So it was a lot of things that went wrong for LSU, a lot of things that went right for A&M, but at the end of the day, they get a huge win. They continue to move forward, and for LSU, I think the way you go from here is, this one's tough. There's no doubt about that, but at the end of the day, you are still in a very good position, at least in terms of making it to the CFP. You do have to win out. You've lost your margin for error, and that is very, very tough. But at the end of the day, you got a huge one against Alabama in a couple of weeks. You win that one, there's not a game on your schedule that you can't win. You have Florida, Vandy, and OU to finish out the year. You should be able to win all those games. Obviously, a lot of questions around this team. If you can't run the ball, then things get a little sketchy. But at the end of the day, not a lot changed about the way that I think about LSU. Definitely feel a little bit worse about this team going forward in terms of the changes that need to be made. But as of right now, they're playing really good football. They had a bad hiccup on Saturday. And if they get back on track during this bye week, they'll be more than fine. And then for A&M, I don't think it has to be said. They're an SEC contender, they're a CFP contender, and they very well could be a title contender. The one question that I do have is this offense under Marcel Reed obviously is going to run the ball. They're going to be very aggressive on the ground. When they go into a game where the defense is fully prepared for that, what does that look like? Because we've seen it in the past. It has worked out at different times. The defense was able to win them a couple of those games. So that game in South Carolina this upcoming weekend is going to tell us a lot of stuff. If they're able to win that one, they are fully on their way to being in a showdown for a spot in the SEC title at the end of the year against Texas. So a huge win for A&M, puts in perspective just how incredible that program could be under a coach that is actually meant to be there. Mike Oko's meant to be there. Absolutely incredible job by him in his first year, and it's not over yet. Still plenty to play for. If they lose that game this upcoming weekend, then a lot of things become sketchy in a hurry. But right now, they're on top of the SEC. They're on top of the world in a lot of ways, and they continue moving forward. But let's take our first break here. And when we come back, we got to talk about Notre Dame and Alabama. It felt like they made some statements this past weekend as well. Notre Dame getting a big win over Navy, as well as Alabama just dominating Missouri from start to finish. So we'll break those down right after this, so stick with us.